There's something both fascinating and terrifying about stories that blur the line between reality and the inexplicable. This story isn't a tale or a rumor, but an account of something that happened to a man named Daniel, who never imagined that such an ordinary object as a mirror could irreversibly change his life. He told me this story personally, and the look in his eyes confirmed it was no fabrication. He saw it and lived to tell the tale. Daniel's life before the mirror. Daniel lived a simple, quiet life. He worked in an office, lived alone, and spent his evenings watching old movies or reading books. One day, while wandering through an antique market, something caught his attention. It was a mirror with an ornate frame, clearly aged, with marks of time that seemed to tell its own story. The vendor described it as unique and assured him it came from an abandoned mansion reputed to be haunted. Daniel, skeptical but drawn to the piece, bought the mirror and brought it home. At first, the mirror seemed to be nothing more than a decorative object. However, it didn't take long for strange things to start happening. Daniel noticed that the mirror's reflection occasionally seemed delayed, as if the images took a second longer to adjust to his movements. He dismissed it, thinking it was just his imagination or the result of sleepless nights. Then, one silent early morning, he was awakened by a sharp noise coming from the living room. Investigating the sound, he saw something that froze his blood. The mirror was covered with handprints, as if someone had pressed their palms against the glass from the inside. Daniel cleaned the marks, but the next day they reappeared deeper and more distinct. The man in the mirror. One night, while Daniel stared into the mirror, he saw something that shouldn't have been there. A figure stood behind him, tall, hooded, and still. He spun around immediately, but the room was empty. When he turned back to the mirror, the figure was still there, motionless, with black, empty eyes that seemed to absorb all the light around them. Daniel couldn't move or scream. He stood frozen as the figure slowly raised a hand and pointed directly at him. After that, Daniel's life became a nightmare. The man in the mirror appeared more frequently, always watching, always pointing. Objects began to disappear from his home, and sometimes he heard whispers coming from the mirror, calling his name. The climax. One night, Daniel decided to rid himself of the mirror. He took it off the wall and carried it to a distant field, intending to destroy it. But before he could deliver the first blow, something impossible happened. The surface of the mirror began to ripple, like water disturbed by a touch. A hand emerged, followed by an arm, and before Daniel could react, the man from the mirror was standing before him, as real as the night surrounding them. The last thing Daniel remembers from that night is the sound of a low, disturbing laugh as everything around him turned to darkness. Daniel woke up in his home with no memory of how he returned. The mirror was back on the wall, flawless, with no signs of the damage he had inflicted in his attempt to destroy it. Since that day, he has never looked directly into the mirror. He covered every reflective surface in his house, but he knows the man in the mirror still there waiting, watching. If you have an old mirror in your home, be careful. Not all reflections show only what's in front of them.